bride disappears on her wedding day. A groom waits at the altar and never sees her arrive. A church full of guests falls into complete silence. This really happened in Colombia in 1982, when Lucy Martinez vanished forever just moments before, marrying the love of her life. How can a woman disappear without leaving a single trace? For 8 years, no one had any answers. The police found nothing. The family searched everywhere. Joseph, her fiancé, lost his sanity waiting for her to return. It seemed like the perfect crime, but in 1990, a fisherman found something terrible. Floating in the river, a wet, mysterious white wedding dress. Inside was a note written in fear that revealed the name of a dangerous man. What followed was a relentless search that crossed countries and ended in a vengeance no one expected. This is the true story of how truth can come to light after years, buried, and how pain can become an unstoppable force for justice. Get ready to discover one of the most shocking cases ever told. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. In the small town of Valledupar, Colombia, May 15, 1982, began with a cool breeze that promised a perfect day for a wedding. Lucy Martinez, 24, woke up at her best friend Carmen's house with a smile that lit up the entire room. It was the most important day of her life. She was going to marry Joseph Herrera, the man who had won her heart 3 years earlier. The San Pedro church was decorated with white and yellow flowers, Lucy's favorite colors. Guests began arriving early, full of excitement. Joseph, nervous but radiant, adjusted his tie for the 10th time as he waited at the altar. His parents, well-respected merchants in the community, had organized a celebration that would be remembered for generations. Lucy looked stunning in her lace wedding dress, custom-made by the region's best seamstress. Her brown hair was styled in an elegant bun adorned with small pearls that had belonged to her grandmother. At 4:30 p.m., everything was ready for the ceremony. "I'm going to the bathroom for a moment," Lucy told Carmen, who was serving as a maid of honor. Those were the last words anyone heard from her. Carmen waited 5 minutes, then 10, then 20. Worried, she went to look for her. The bathroom was empty. Lucy had vanished without a trace. The search began immediately. Joseph, desperate, scoured every corner of the house. Guests joined the search. The local police were alerted. However, there were no signs of a struggle. The windows were locked from the inside, and even stranger, all of Lucy's valuables remained untouched: her jewelry, her purse full of money, even the shoes she had left by the bathroom door. The mystery deepened when investigators discovered there were no other possible exits. It was as if Lucy had vanished into thin air. Joseph, devastated, spent days without sleeping, combing nearby forests and rivers. The entire community mobilized, but Lucy seemed to have disappeared from the world. Inspector Manuel Rodriguez, a police veteran from Valledupar with 30 years of experience, took over the case. He had never seen anything so baffling. His first theory was that Lucy had a case of cold feet and fled voluntarily. But that hypothesis didn't align with her personality. Testimonies from friends and family painted the picture of a stable young woman, deeply in love with Joseph and eager to marry. Lucy worked as a nurse at the local clinic and was loved by everyone. She had no known enemies or financial problems that could have motivated a disappearance. Inspector Rodriguez questioned Joseph extensively. The 26-year-old mechanic owned a successful workshop. His alibi was solid. He had been in the church, surrounded by over 100 guests. His answers were consistent, and his grief appeared genuine. Both families confirmed the couple was happy, and there were no signs of conflict. During the first week, the investigation focused on the surrounding area. Searches were conducted in nearby forests, wells were dredged, and abandoned houses were inspected. Search dogs followed trails that ended abruptly in different parts of the city, suggesting Lucy had been moved in a vehicle. The kidnapping theory gained traction when it was discovered that Lucy had received some strange phone calls in the weeks leading up to the wedding. Carmen remembered Lucy mentioning someone would call and hang up as soon as she answered. However, in 1982, tracing calls was extremely difficult in a small city like Valajupa. Investigators also explored the possibility that Lucy had been a victim of human trafficking. At the time, Colombia was facing increasing issues with criminal networks operating in rural areas. However, there was no evidence of such activity in the region. As the days passed, Inspector Rodriguez grew increasingly frustrated. Every promising lead ended in a dead end. One witness reported seeing a woman in a white dress near the river, but it turned out to be another bride who had visited the area for wedding photos days earlier. Joseph had become a shadow of himself. He spent nights wandering the streets of Valajupa, calling out Lucy's name, hoping she would somehow appear. His parents and friends tried to console him, but he rejected any help. Guilt consumed him, even though there was nothing he could have done differently. The investigation uncovered some disturbing details about the months leading up to the wedding. According to Carmen, Lucy had been more nervous than usual, though they had attributed it to wedding stress. On one occasion, Lucy mentioned feeling like someone was watching her, but when Carmen asked for details, Lucy quickly changed the subject. Inspector Rodriguez decided to expand the investigation to the clinic where Lucy worked. San Rafael Clinic was a small medical facility that served middle-class families in the city. Lucy had worked there for 2 years and was considered an exemplary employee by the director, Dr. Emilio Vasquez. During interviews with the medical staff, the name Caleb James came up, a U.S. doctor who had worked at the clinic for 6 months. He had been hired in January 1982 to fill a temporary vacancy, but his contract ended abruptly in March, just 2 months before Lucy's wedding. Dr. Vasquez was reluctant to discuss the reasons for Caleb's departure, vaguely citing professional differences. However, a nurse named Maria Teresa revealed more specific information. Caleb had shown an excessive interest in Lucy, making inappropriate comments about her appearance and repeatedly trying to ask her out. Despite her rejections, the investigation into Caleb James revealed a troubling pattern. The 35-year-old doctor had arrived in Valajupa with impeccable credentials and excellent references from hospitals in the United States. He was an internal medicine specialist and had initially impressed the clinic staff with his knowledge and dedication. However, his behavior toward Lucy had become problematic from the early weeks. According to staff testimonies, Caleb would look for excuses to be near Lucy, bring her flowers for no apparent reason, and tell other employees he was fascinated by her beauty and kindness. Maria Teresa recalled a particular incident in February. Caleb had followed Lucy to the parking lot after work and had tried to hold her hand. While confessing his feelings, Lucy firmly rejected his advances, explaining she was engaged and deeply in love with Joseph. The situation worsened when Caleb began showing obsessive behaviors. He arrived early to work to be there when Lucy arrived. He rearranged shifts to work alongside her and had been seen several times watching her from his office. Other staff members began to feel uncomfortable. The breaking point came in March when a patient reported that Dr. James had asked inappropriate questions about Lucy. During a consultation, the patient, an elderly woman named Eleanor Morales, had casually mentioned she knew Lucy and that she was soon getting married. Caleb had reacted with alarming intensity, interrogating the patient about the wedding and Lucy's relationship with Joseph. Vasquez had finally confronted Caleb about his behavior. The American doctor denied any wrongdoing, but his contract was not renewed. Officially, it was announced that Caleb had decided to return to the United States for personal reasons, but the truth was he had been fired for workplace harassment. Inspector Rodriguez immediately went to the hotel where Caleb had stayed during his time in Valajupa. The Colonial Hotel, located in the city center, was a modest but respectable establishment commonly used by visiting professionals. The hotel register confirmed that Caleb James had stayed from January to March of 1982. However, there was something odd. According to the concierge, Caleb had returned to the hotel on May 16th, the day after Lucy's failed wedding. He paid for one night but disappeared before dawn without formally checking out. The hotel staff remembered Caleb as a quiet and polite guest, although some employees mentioned he had seemed nervous and agitated in his final weeks. The maid who cleaned his room, Rosa Jimenez, recalled finding burnt papers in the bathroom during his last stay in May. The investigation intensified when it was discovered that Caleb had rented a car. On May 15th, the day of the wedding, the rental agency confirmed he returned the vehicle early in the morning of May 16th, but the night employee noted the car was unusually dirty and damp, as if it had been near the river. Attempts to locate Caleb James in the United States were unsuccessful. Colombian authorities contacted U.S. law enforcement, but there was no trace of the doctor. His medical license had been suspended in Florida for unprofessional conduct just a month before he arrived in Colombia, something that had not been properly verified during his hiring process. The investigation revealed Caleb had used falsified documents to obtain the job at the clinic. His real name was Kayeb Mitchell, and he had a criminal record for harassment and assault in different states. He had developed a pattern of securing temporary medical positions in remote areas where background checks were less strict. Years passed with no answers. Joseph never fully recovered from Lucy's loss. He moved to Bogota, where he found work as a supervisor at an automobile factory, but he returned to Valledupar every year on the date of the failed wedding, hoping to find a new clue. The official investigation gradually cooled. Inspector Rodriguez retired in 1985, carrying with him the frustration of never solving the case that had marked him the most. His successor, Inspector Carlos Mendoza, periodically reviewed the file but found no new leads. Lucy Martinez's case was filed away among the unsolved mysteries. Lucy's family never gave up hope. Her mother, Dolores, kept Lucy's room exactly as she had left it, convinced her daughter would return one day. Her father, Ricardo, spent his savings hiring private investigators, but none were able to find any answers. The Valledupar community gradually stopped talking about the case. Rumors and conspiracy theories circulated for years. Some believed Lucy had been kidnapped by guerrillas, others thought she had run away with a secret lover, and the most superstitious spoke of supernatural forces. Joseph had tried to rebuild his life. In 1986, he met Patricia, a compassionate schoolteacher who tried to help him heal. However, the relationship ended when Patricia realized Joseph was still obsessed with Lucy. Emotionally unable to commit to anyone else, time seemed to have buried the mystery forever. Caleb James had vanished as completely as Lucy, and without new leads. The case appeared destined to remain unsolved, but fate had other plans, and 8 years later, the river that had remained silent for so long would finally reveal its secrets. On September 23, 1990, Esteban Morales, a 52-year-old fisherman, headed to the Guatapuri River early in the morning for his usual routine. Esteban knew the river like the back of his hand. He had fished its waters for over 30 years and knew exactly where to find the best catches. That morning, something unusual was floating in the calm waters near the shore. At first, Esteban thought it was trash or an object washed downstream, but as he approached with his canoe, he realized it was something far more disturbing. Floating partially submerged was a simple wooden canoe, the kind local fishermen had used decades earlier. Inside the canoe, perfectly preserved by the river's cold waters, was a white wedding dress. The dress was soaked but intact, as if someone had carefully placed it in the boat. Esteban felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning breeze. His hands trembled as he used his net to pull the canoe closer. The dress was beautiful, made of delicate lace and small pearls, but there was something sinister about the way it lay at the bottom of the canoe, like the shroud of a ghost bride. Not far from the canoe, floating freely in the water, Esteban saw other objects. A man's light-colored suit, stained and worn from the water, swayed gently with the current. Beside it, a bouquet of white flowers, now wilted and faded, completed the macabre scene. Esteban had lived in Valledupar his whole life and remembered the case of Lucy Martinez vividly. 8 years later, the river was returning evidence of a tragedy that had scarred the entire community. With shaking hands, he He paddled to the shore and ran to the nearest police station, Esteban Morales's. Arrival at the station caused immediate uproar. Inspector Carlos Mendoza, who had inherited the unsolved case, went to the river with a team of forensic investigators. The scene they found confirmed their worst fears. The wedding dress was carefully removed from the water and taken to the forensic lab. It was, without a doubt, the dress Lucy had been wearing the day she disappeared. Carmen, her maid of honor, identified it immediately through photographs. The lace had a specific pattern that had been sewn especially for Lucy. During a detailed examination of the dress, forensic expert Maria Elena Castillo made a discovery that would change the course of the investigation. Sewn into the inside of the dress, nearly invisible to the naked eye, was a small handwritten note. The ink had partially run due to the water, but the message was still readable. If anything happens to me, look for Caleb James. He will never leave me alone. I'm scared. Lucy. The note was written in Lucy's unmistakable handwriting. Carmen and her parents confirmed its authenticity. The message revealed that Lucy had found time to prepare this piece of evidence, suggesting she knew she was in danger and had taken precautions to ensure her killer would be identified. The investigation was immediately reopened. Inspector Mendoza contacted international authorities to intensify the search for Caleb James. The case files were thoroughly reviewed, and it was confirmed that Caleb had indeed been in Valledupar the day Lucy disappeared. Forensic analysis of the dress revealed more critical evidence: carpet fibers matching those from the car Caleb had rented, hairs matching samples from his hotel room, and most importantly traces of blood consistent with Lucy's blood type. A reconstruction of the events began to take shape. Lucy had likely been kidnapped when she stepped out of the bathroom and transported in the rented car. The killer had kept the dress as a macabre trophy, but later threw it into the river, along with Joseph's suit in a grotesque reenactment of the wedding. That never happened. Joseph Herrera received the news of the discovery while working in Bogota. The man who had lived 8 years with a broken heart felt the wound reopen, but this time he was consumed by a thirst for vengeance. He finally had the name of Lucy's killer: Caleb James. Joseph quit his job immediately and returned to Valledupar. His appearance had changed dramatically over the 8 years. The hopeful young man had become someone hardened by pain. His eyes, once full of love, now burned with cold, calculated determination. The official investigation continued, but Joseph was not willing to wait for justice to take its slow course. He hired a private investigator, Rodrigo Vega, a specialist in international cases. Vega had contacts in the United States and had previously worked with fugitive tracking cases, while the police struggled with international bureaucracy. Joseph and Vega resorted to less conventional methods. They used networks of medical contacts, investigated rural hospitals across the United States, and followed leads that official authorities couldn't pursue due to legal limitations. Their search led them through several U.S. states. Caleb had used multiple false identities, but always followed the same pattern: temporary medical jobs in small communities, obsessive behavior toward young women, and sudden disappearances when things got complicated. Finally, in March of 1991, Vega tracked Caleb down in a small town in Montana, where he was working at a rural clinic under the name Carl Johnson. The man had aged considerably, but it was definitely the same doctor who had worked in Valledupar 8 years earlier. Joseph flew to the United States immediately. His plan was simple yet devastating: confront Caleb and force a confession before turning him over to the authorities. What Joseph didn't know was that Caleb had been living with guilt for 8 years, and their encounter would trigger a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. On April 15, 1991, exactly 9 years after Lucy and Joseph's original wedding date, the two men came face to face in a secluded cabin in the Montana mountains. Joseph had followed Caleb to his hideout, where the doctor lived under a false identity, working as a healer in an isolated community. Caleb immediately recognized Joseph. Years of guilt had taken their toll. The doctor had developed a drinking problem and was tormented by recurring nightmares about Lucy. when he saw Joseph standing at the door of his cabin. He knew the time had finally come to face the consequences of his actions. The confrontation was less violent than Joseph had imagined. Caleb, broken by years of remorse, confessed immediately. He had kidnapped Lucy on the day of her wedding, taking her to an abandoned house on the outskirts of Valadupa. His plan had been to convince her to come with him to the United States, where they could start a new life together. However, Lucy had fought desperately in her attempt to escape. She had fallen and hit her head on a wooden table. Caleb, a doctor by profession, knew the injury was fatal. Instead of seeking medical help, he panicked and decided to hide the body in the river using weights to keep it submerged. Before dying, Lucy had managed to write the accusatory note and sew it into her dress, knowing it would eventually be found. Her final act was to ensure her killer would be identified, even if she didn't survive to tell the story herself. Joseph listened to the confession with a calm that surprised both men. Instead of the violent revenge he had imagined, he felt a strange peace in finally knowing the truth. Caleb was turned over to US authorities, who extradited him to Colombia to face charges of kidnapping and murder. The trial became a media sensation. Caleb was sentenced to 25 years in prison but died just 2 years later, apparently from complications related to his alcoholism. Joseph was finally able to close that chapter of his life and honor Lucy's memory by establishing a foundation to help families of victims of unsolved crimes. The story of Lucy and Joseph became a powerful reminder that the truth, though delayed, eventually comes to light, and that true love can survive even the most devastating tragedies. If you've made it this far and want to hear more stories like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Leave a like so we can continue sharing more stories like this one. See you next time.